John had never expected to be part of such an incredible journey. As a deep space explorer, he had seen many strange and beautiful things, but nothing quite like this. His mission was simple: to chart new territories in the far reaches of the galaxy. The unknowns of space fascinated him, and his ship, the Horizon, was well equipped for the task. But nothing could have prepared him for the encounter he would have with the Xylar, an advanced alien race with a mysterious history and unparalleled technology. John had been stationed on the Xylar homeworld for weeks now, conducting peaceful, diplomatic missions. The Xylar were not hostile, but their culture was vastly different from his own. They communicated with a grace that seemed almost too perfect, a balance of speech and silence that John struggled to match. Still, he had managed to establish a connection, building rapport with the Xylar leaders, but none of them intrigued him as much as Princess Ariana. From the moment they met, John had felt an unspoken connection with her. Ariana was unlike any woman he had ever met. She was regal, her posture perfect, and her presence commanding. She held herself with the grace of someone who had been born to rule. Yet when their conversations began, he noticed something in her eyes, a curiosity that went beyond the usual formalities of diplomacy. It wasn't long before their conversations moved past the normal pleasantries of intergalactic relations. John found himself chatting with Ariana every evening, sometimes long into the night as they shared stories of their worlds. She asked him about Earth, about human history, and the complexities of life there. John, in turn, asked her about Xylar, about her people's history and their way of life. But there was something different in the way Ariana listened. Her eyes would light up when she asked about human emotions, about love and relationships. It was as if she couldn't quite understand the way humans connected with one another, but she was eager to learn. It was these late-night talks that made John feel both at ease and out of place. He couldn't help but feel like Ariana was drawing him in, pulling him closer with each passing conversation. Her questions were never just about facts. They were personal, probing, as if she was trying to understand something deeper, something human. One evening, after discussing the concept of family on Earth, Ariana spoke quietly. "Tell me, John," she began, her voice soft, "how do humans know when they are in love?" The question was simple, but it felt heavy, like she was searching for an answer she didn't fully understand. John paused, thinking about her words. "It's hard to explain," he said after a moment. "Love is different for everyone. For me, it's about connection, about finding someone who makes you feel complete. It's not something you can measure or predict. It just happens." Ariana looked down for a moment, lost in thought. Her face was unreadable, but John could sense a shift in her energy. She was deep in thought, trying to process something. "You're right," she finally said, her voice distant. "I have been taught that love is a thing of weakness. My people are taught to prioritize duty over emotion. But I wonder, John, if that's all there is." Her gaze met his, and for a moment, John could see vulnerability in her eyes. Side of her that no one else had likely seen. John didn't know how to respond. He had only known Ariana for a short time, but he felt like he was starting to understand her better than anyone. She wasn't just a princess. She was someone searching for more than what her royal duties demanded of her. He felt a deep empathy for her. "I think," John said slowly, "that there's more to life than duty and responsibility. We all need to find meaning in the connections we make. Without that, everything feels empty." Ariana smiled faintly, and for the first time since they had met, John saw a softness in her expression. It was fleeting, but it was there. The walls she had built around herself were starting to come down. As the days went by, their conversations grew more personal. They shared stories of childhood, of the things that shaped them into the people they were. John learned that Ariana had never been allowed to form close friendships. As a princess, she had been raised to be above such things. She had been groomed for a life of duty, always expected to marry a prince from another world to secure political alliances. Love, for her, was nothing more than a distant fantasy. But with John, it was different. She began to ask him questions that had nothing to do with politics or diplomacy. She wanted to know about Earth's art, its music, its dreams. And she was genuinely interested. For once, she wasn't talking to him as a diplomat. She was talking to him as a person. John couldn't help but feel flattered, though he knew there was still a large divide between their worlds. One night, after a particularly long conversation, Ariana asked something unexpected. "Do you have someone back on Earth? A family? A partner?" Her voice was casual, but John could sense a hint of curiosity in it. John was taken aback by the question. He hadn't expected her to ask something so personal. "No," he answered truthfully. "I don't have a partner. My job keeps me busy, and I guess I never really focused on finding someone." Ariana seemed to consider this for a long moment. Her gaze softened, and John couldn't help but notice the way she looked at him, as though she were seeing him for the first time. It made his heart race. "Interesting," she murmured, almost to herself. "I have always thought that emotions were something to be controlled. But now I wonder if there is more to them than I was taught." John didn't know what to say to that. He was no expert on emotions or love, but he knew enough to recognize that Ariana was beginning to question everything she had been taught. For someone as powerful as her, this kind of vulnerability was rare, and it made him wonder, what if there was more to this connection between them than either of them had realized? But just as quickly as it had started, the moment passed. Ariana stood up, her expression returning to its usual regal calm. "I must go," she said softly. "There are duties I must attend to." John nodded, though part of him wanted to protest. He wasn't ready to leave the conversation, to step back into the cold formalities that often separated them. But he knew she had her responsibilities, and he couldn't ask her to ignore them. "Of course," he said, standing to leave. "I'll see you tomorrow." She smiled, a small, quiet smile. "Yes, John. Until tomorrow." As Ariana walked away, John couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between them. Their connection had deepened, and he wasn't sure where it would lead. But one thing was clear. Whatever it was only just beginning. The days passed by in a blur, each one melding into the next as John found himself spending more time with Princess Ariana. What had started as casual conversations about space and diplomacy soon turned into discussions about life, love, and the differences between their worlds. John couldn't deny the growing bond between them, but he also couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Ariana's interest in him, something she wasn't saying. He'd noticed the way she looked at him, her eyes searching, studying him with a curiosity that felt almost too intense for a mere diplomat. It wasn't just the formal questions anymore. She was asking about things that mattered on a deeper level. She wanted to know about Earth's music, about human creativity, and even about how people formed relationships. The deeper they dug into these topics, the more John found himself wondering if there was something else behind her fascination with him. But what? John's suspicions only grew stronger after their last conversation. Ariana had asked him about his personal life, about whether he was in a relationship back on Earth. When he told her no, she seemed to take a moment before offering him a strange, thoughtful look. The way she had looked at him made him wonder if his response had meant more to her than he had realized. The next evening, after another long day of talks and meetings, John found himself walking the palace halls once more, his thoughts consumed with the princess. He had grown to admire her, but now he was starting to wonder whether his growing feelings were just a product of their long conversations, or if something deeper was at play. He arrived at the room where they usually met, expecting another intellectual discussion. What he didn't expect was the change in Ariana. She was sitting by the window staring out at the dark sky, lost in thought. Her usual composed demeanor was gone, replaced by an air of quiet contemplation. "John," she said, without turning to face him. Her voice was soft, distant. You've been very open with me about your world, about Earth, but I've not been as open with you. John stepped closer, sensing the weight in her words. What do you mean? She sighed, her shoulders slumping, slightly. I have a secret, one that I have never shared with anyone, not even my father or the council. Finally, she turned to face him, her face a mixture of sadness and vulnerability. I have never wanted the life that has been planned for me. John blinked, surprised by her admission. What do you mean? You're a princess. You have responsibilities. Yes, Ariana said, her voice laced with frustration. Responsibilities that have been chosen for me. I was never asked if I wanted them. I was never given a choice. She stood up, pacing slowly across the room. From the moment I was born, I've been groomed for one purpose: to marry someone who will help strengthen my people's alliances, to carry out the wishes of my father and the council. But I never wanted that. I want something more. I want to choose my own path. John watched her closely, his heart heavy with sympathy. He had heard of royal traditions, of political marriages between powerful families, but hearing it from Ariana, seeing the pain in her eyes, made it all the more real. I can't imagine what that must be like, he said quietly. To have your life mapped out for you. Ariana stopped pacing and looked at him with a mixture of hope and desperation in her eyes. And that's why I'm telling you this, because you're different, John. You're not like anyone I've ever met. You don't see me as a princess or as a political pawn. You see me as a person. And for once, I feel like I can be someone other than just the future ruler of the Xyler. John didn't know what to say. He was still processing what she had revealed. She had lived a life of duty and expectation, never allowed to experience freedom or make her own choices. It was something he could never fully understand, but he could feel the weight of her words in his chest. He stepped closer to her, his voice soft. I don't know what the future holds, Ariana, but you deserve to live a life that's yours. You deserve to be happy. A tear slid down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. I don't know what happiness even looks like anymore, she whispered. I've never been allowed to find it for myself. John's heart ached for her. He reached out, gently placing a hand on her arm, an unspoken gesture of support. I'm here for you, Ariana. You don't have to go through this alone. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. Thank you, John. I don't know what I would do without you. The moment hung in the air between them, a delicate silence stretching out. For the first time, Ariana seemed vulnerable, open in a way that she hadn't been before. She wasn't just the princess anymore. She was a person, struggling with the same desires and fears that anyone might face. It made John realize just how much he had come to care for her, not just as a diplomat or a princess, but as a woman, someone who deserved to choose her own destiny. But even as he felt that pull toward her, John couldn't ignore the nagging thought at the back of his mind. Why was she telling him all of this now? Was it simply a cry for help, or was there something more? Could she be confiding in him because she was lonely? Or was there a deeper connection forming between them? As much as he wanted to believe that she had come to him for comfort, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. Ariana was hiding something. He didn't know what it was yet, but he was determined to find out. I'm here for you, Ariana, John repeated, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. But you have to trust me. Whatever it is you're not saying, you can tell me. She nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving his. For a long moment, it felt like the weight of the galaxy itself hung in the balance between them. I will, she said softly, but not yet. The days that followed were filled with a strange tension between John and Ariana. Though their conversations continued, they had shifted. Something unspoken hung in the air. John had been trying to understand the depth of Ariana's situation, but it wasn't easy. Every time he thought he had a grip on things, she would retreat into silence, her eyes holding secrets she wasn't ready to share. It wasn't just the emotional weight of her words that affected him. It was the cultural divide that seemed impossible to bridge. Ariana came from a world so different from his own, with customs and expectations that he could barely comprehend. And yet, he found himself wanting to understand more, wanting to break through the walls she had built around herself. One evening, after another long day of meetings and discussions, John found himself standing in front of Ariana's private quarters. He had been invited, of course, but this time, he wasn't sure what to expect. Would it be another conversation about duty and family? Or would it be something more personal, more intimate? When he entered the room, Ariana was sitting at a table, a large book spread out before her. She looked up when he entered, her expression softening when she saw him. "John," she greeted him warmly, motioning for him to take a seat. "I'm glad you came." John nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change between them. There was a new sense of seriousness in her tone, a weight to her words that made him hesitate for a moment before sitting down. "What's on your mind, Ariana?" he asked gently. "You seem different tonight." Ariana closed the book slowly, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that caught him off guard. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady. "I've been taught all my life that duty is everything, that emotions are distractions. But now I'm beginning to question that. I'm starting to realize that I've spent so much of my life following a path laid out for me by others, a path that doesn't allow for personal choice, a path that has led me here to you." John felt his heart race at her words. He wasn't sure what she was getting at, but the way she spoke made him feel as though the world around them had shrunk, leaving only the two of them. "I don't know what to say," John admitted, his voice low. "I can't pretend to understand. Everything you've been through, your people's traditions, your responsibilities, they're so different from what I know." Ariana nodded, her gaze dropping to the book before her. "I know. The Xyler way of life is built on order and tradition. There is no room for questioning. Our marriages are not about love. They are political, calculated. And the pressure to conform to that, it's suffocating." John reached across the table, gently touching her hand. "But it doesn't have to be that way, does it? You're a person, not just a princess. You deserve to have choices." Her eyes met his again, a flicker of something soft passing through them. "I know, but how do I change everything I've known? How do I break free from the expectations placed on me without causing chaos?" John thought for a moment. It was a question he didn't have a clear answer to, but he felt strongly that she needed to hear something. Sometimes, change starts with just one small step. You don't have to change everything all at once. You just need to decide for yourself what matters most. Ariana's lips quirked into a small, almost sad smile. "I wish it were that simple." They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of her words settling between them. John knew that Ariana was facing a monumental, internal struggle, but he also knew that she wasn't alone. He had been there for her through everything so far, and he wasn't about to stop now. "I can't pretend to understand your life, Ariana," John said softly. "But I do know one thing. You're not defined by your title or your duties. You're more than that." She looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. "I want to believe that. I want to believe that I can make my own choices, that I'm not just a pawn in someone else's game. But every time I try to think for myself, the weight of my responsibilities crushes me." John leaned in, his voice earnest. "That's because you've been carrying them for so long, but you don't have to carry them alone. And you don't have to carry them forever. You deserve a life where you can be free to choose your path without fear." Ariana's eyes softened, and for the first time in their conversations, John saw a glimpse of hope in her expression. It was fleeting, but it was there, like a light breaking through the darkness. "I don't know what the future holds, John," she said quietly, "but I know that you make me feel like I have a future where I can be more than just a princess." John felt a surge of emotion in his chest. He had never imagined that a conversation like this would lead to such a profound realization. He had come to care for Ariana, not just because of her title, but because of the person she was becoming before his eyes. She was no longer just a symbol of her people. She was someone with hopes, dreams, and fears, just like him. "I'll always be here for you, Ariana," he said softly, his hand still resting on hers. "Whatever you choose, whatever path you take, I'll support you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was comfortable now, not heavy with uncertainty, but filled with a sense of understanding. Ariana looked down at their hands, her fingers gently curling around his. "You're the only one who has ever treated me like a person," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." John smiled, his heart swelling with a mixture of tenderness and admiration. He hadn't realized how much he wanted to hear those words until she spoke them. It wasn't about being her savior. It wasn't about fixing her life. It was about being there for her, supporting her, and giving her the freedom to make her own choices. As they sat there, the quiet hum of the palace surrounding them, John couldn't help but feel that they were at the beginning of something far greater than either of them had imagined. They were two people from entirely different worlds, yet in this moment it didn't matter. All that mattered was that they had found each other. The following days seemed to pass in a dreamlike haze for John. He couldn't shake the thought of Ariana from his mind. Every conversation with her felt like a step towards something greater, something more than either of them had expected. There was an undeniable chemistry between them, one that neither of them had been able to ignore. But even as their connection deepened, John found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions he had never anticipated. Ariana, on the other hand, seemed to be changing before his eyes. The regal, composed princess he had first met had begun to show a side of herself that was more human, more vulnerable. The walls she had built around her were slowly crumbling, and John couldn't help but feel honored to be the one she was letting in. One evening, after another long day of diplomatic meetings, John found himself once again walking toward Ariana's quarters. He had been thinking about her all day, about the way she had opened up to him, the way she had shared her fears and doubts. He couldn't help but wonder if there was more to her feelings than simple friendship. Was she beginning to feel the same pull toward him that he felt toward her? When he arrived, Ariana was waiting for him. She was standing by the window again, her gaze fixed on the stars outside. The sight of her, so regal and yet so fragile, made John's heart skip a beat. "John," she said, turning to face him, "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation, about everything we've shared." John stepped closer, his heart racing. "And what have you been thinking?" Ariana took a deep breath, her eyes searching his. "I've been thinking about what you said, about choosing my own path. For the first time in my life, I'm starting to believe that maybe I can." John's pulse quickened. "You can, Ariana. You have the power to choose your own future. You don't have to be bound by anyone's expectations." She smiled, but there was still a trace of uncertainty in her eyes. "I want to believe that. I want to believe that I can have a future where I make my own choices, a future where I'm not just a symbol of my people's power, but a person with dreams and desires of my own." John reached out, taking her hand in his. He could feel the warmth of her skin, the softness of her touch, and it made his heart race even faster. "I believe in you, Ariana. You don't have to do this alone." For a long moment they simply stood there, hand in hand, as the world outside seemed to fade away. It was as though everything had led to this moment, this undeniable connection between them. John could feel it, the spark that had been growing since their very first conversation. It wasn't just friendship. It was something more, something deeper. "I don't know what to do with these feelings," Ariana said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "I've spent my whole life pushing my emotions aside, thinking they were a weakness, but now I don't know how to ignore them anymore." John gently lifted her chin, guiding her gaze to meet his. "You don't have to ignore them, Ariana. Not with me. You don't have to hide who you are or what you feel. You've been carrying so much for so long. Let me carry some of it with you." Her eyes searched his face as if trying to determine if he was sincere, and in that moment John realized that he was. He was ready to stand by her, no matter what challenges lay ahead. "I don't know if I'm ready," Ariana said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've spent my life preparing to be a ruler, to be something I didn't choose. I don't know how to be anything else." John smiled gently, his thumb brushing across her hand. "You don't have to be anything you don't want to be. Just be yourself. That's all that matters to me." A tear slipped down Ariana's cheek, but this time she didn't try to wipe it away. It was as though she was finally letting herself feel everything she had been holding in for so long. The walls she had built around herself, the ones that kept her safe from the world, were starting to crumble piece by piece. "I want to believe you," Ariana said, her voice thick with emotion. "I want to believe that I can have a future, that I can make choices for myself. But I'm so scared. Scared of what it might mean. Scared of the consequences." John gently cupped her face in his hands, his gaze unwavering. "Whatever the consequences, you don't have to face them alone. I'll be right here with you. No matter what happens, we'll figure it out together." Ariana's breath caught in her throat as she looked into his eyes. For a moment, it felt like time stood still, as though the entire universe had aligned to bring them to this point. She had always been told that love was a weakness, that emotions could cloud her judgment. But now, standing before John, she was starting to see that perhaps love was the one thing that could set her free. She leaned in slightly, her heart pounding in her chest. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she whispered. "But I want to try with you." John's heart raced as he leaned in closer, his face inches from hers. "We don't have to rush anything, Ariana, we can take it slow. But just know this. Whatever happens, I'll be here for you." And then, before either of them could say anything more, their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss. It wasn't rushed or forceful. It was gentle, filled with all the emotions that had been building between them. In that moment, everything felt right. There was no more fear, no more doubt, just the connection between them, pure and simple. As they pulled away, both of them breathing a little faster, Ariana smiled softly. "Thank you, John, for making me feel like I'm allowed to be more than just a princess." John smiled back, his heart full. "You're so much more than that, Ariana. You always have been." For the first time in a long time, Ariana felt hope stirring within her. Maybe she didn't have to be trapped by the weight of her title. Maybe she could choose her own path after all. And as they stood there, hand in hand, John knew that whatever the future held for them, they would face it together. The days following their kiss were filled with a quiet kind of tension, the air around them charged with new possibilities. John and Ariana had spent hours together, talking and sharing their dreams for the future. It was as though the world outside had faded away, leaving just the two of them in their own small corner of the universe. But even in this cocoon of comfort, John knew that there were still challenges ahead, challenges they would have to face together. Ariana had been struggling with the weight of her royal duties, trying to balance the responsibilities placed upon her with her desire for personal freedom, and John, though he cared for her deeply, couldn't help but feel the pressure of the world around them closing in. He had always been a man of action, a man who believed in fighting for what he wanted. But this was different. This was a life that would require careful thought, patience, and understanding. One evening, after another long day of meetings and discussions, John found himself sitting in the garden, watching the stars above. It was a clear night, the sky a deep shade of black, filled with the endless sparkle of distant stars. He had always been fascinated by space, by the vastness of the universe. But tonight, his mind was consumed by thoughts of Ariana. Where was she? What was she thinking? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. He turned to find Ariana standing a few feet away, her silhouette framed by the soft light of the palace. She looked beautiful, as always, her long hair falling in gentle waves around her shoulders. But there was something in her eyes that made John's heart ache, something that told him she was struggling with something deeper than just her royal duties. "Ariana," he called softly, his voice breaking the silence of the night. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "John," she replied, her voice gentle but distant. "I didn't mean to interrupt your thoughts." "You're not interrupting," he said, standing to greet her. "I was just thinking about everything. About us." Ariana took a step closer, her gaze fixed on the stars. "I've been thinking a lot, too," she said quietly. "About what you said. About making my own choices. I've been trying to figure out what that means for me." John stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "And what have you decided?" She looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know if I can. I want to believe that I can have a future outside of what's been planned for me. But the truth is, my life has always been mapped out for me. My father, the council, they all have their expectations, and I'm not sure if I can break free from that. I'm not sure if I'm strong enough to defy everything I've known." John reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You don't have to do this alone, Ariana. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders," she sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "I've spent so much of my life trying to please everyone else. But what about me? What do I want? Do I even know what I want anymore?" John's heart broke for her. He could see the inner turmoil in her eyes, the struggle to reconcile the expectations of her people with her own desires. She was a princess, born into a life of duty and responsibility. But she was also a woman with dreams and hopes of her own, and those dreams, those desires had always been pushed aside in favor of her role as a leader. "I think you know what you want," John said softly. "You've just been afraid to admit it. You've spent so long trying to be what others want you to be that you've forgotten who you really are. But I see you, Ariana. I see the woman behind the princess. And I know that you're strong enough to make your own choices." Ariana's gaze softened, and for a moment it felt like the world had stopped moving. She looked at him as though she were seeing him for the first time, her eyes searching his face for something she hadn't seen before. "I've never had someone like you in my life, John," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "Someone who believes in me. Someone who doesn't see me as just a symbol but as a person. You make me feel like I have a choice, like I can choose my own future." John squeezed her hand gently. "Because you do. You don't have to follow a path that isn't yours. You deserve to be happy, Ariana. You deserve to live a life where you can make your own decisions, where you can choose what's best for you." Tears welled up in her eyes, but this time she didn't try to hide them. She let them fall, the weight of her emotions pouring out after years of repression. "I'm scared, John," she whispered. "I'm scared of what might happen if I choose my own path. I'm scared of what my people will think. I'm scared of letting go of everything I've ever known." John gently wiped the tears from her cheek, his touch tender. "You don't have to let go of everything, Ariana. You just need to find what's right for you, and I'll be here no matter what. I'll be with you every step of the way." She closed her eyes, her breath shaky as she took in his words. "You're willing to stand by me, even if everything falls apart?" "Always," John said, his voice steady. "Whatever happens, I'll stand by you. I believe in you, Ariana." For a long moment they simply stood there, hand in hand, the weight of their words hanging between them. In that moment, Ariana realized something she had been too afraid to admit before. She had been given a choice. She had the power to decide her future, to live a life that was her own. And for the first time in her life, she didn't have to do it alone. "I'm ready, John," she said softly, her voice filled with determination. "I'm ready to make my own choices, and I want you by my side." John smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I'm right here, Ariana. I always will be." And in that moment, as the stars twinkled above them, John knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, stronger than ever before. The days following Ariana's declaration were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. There was no longer any doubt between John and Ariana. Both of them knew that they had to make a choice, not just for the future of their relationship, but for their own futures as well. For Ariana, it was a decision that would forever change the course of her life, a life that had always been dictated by the royal blood running through her veins. But now, for the first time, she felt as though she had the power to decide her own destiny. John had always believed in fighting for what was right, for what mattered most. But this was different. This wasn't a battle against an enemy or a force beyond their control. This was a battle of hearts, a fight for freedom, and it was one that John was willing to face with Ariana, side by side. The palace was buzzing with activity as the Royal Council prepared for a major diplomatic summit. The air was thick with anticipation, as representatives from various planets were coming to discuss trade agreements, military alliances, and the future of the Xylar Empire. But despite the urgency of the summit, Ariana couldn't help but feel a gnawing sense of discomfort. She had once believed that her purpose was to secure the future of her people, to uphold the legacy of her ancestors. But now, the weight of that responsibility seemed unbearable. John noticed the change in her. She had always been composed, a pillar of strength in the face of her duties, but now she seemed distant, lost in her thoughts. He knew what was on her mind. She was grappling with the choice she had made, the decision that would determine the path she would walk for the rest of her life. That evening, they met in the garden once again, the familiar quiet of the night surrounding them. The stars above seemed brighter tonight, as though the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for the decision that would change everything. "Ariana," John began, his voice soft. "How are you feeling?" She turned. To him, her face a mix of uncertainty and determination. "I don't know," she admitted. "The weight of everything is still heavy on me. I've been trained my entire life to do what's expected of me. But now that I've made this choice, I don't know how to let go." John stepped closer, his presence steady and calming. "You don't have to let go of everything, Ariana. You don't have to give up who you are. You're still the same person, the same strong woman who wants to make a difference in the world. You're just choosing to do it on your own terms. Now." She smiled faintly, her eyes searching his. "I never thought I could have a choice. It's always been about what's best for my people, for my family. But what if choosing for myself means letting them down? What if I'm not strong enough to carry the burden of my people's expectations and my own desires?" John gently took her hand in his. "You're stronger than you think. Choosing your own path doesn't mean you're abandoning anyone. It means you're finally giving yourself the freedom to live the life you've always wanted. It's the most courageous thing you can do." Ariana squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I don't know what the future holds, John. I don't know what will happen if I follow my heart. But I can't keep living in the shadow of what others expect of me. I have to take control of my own destiny." John smiled, his heart full of pride for her. "And I'll be right there with you. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." For a long moment, they simply stood there, hand in hand, the weight of their words sinking in. Ariana had made her decision. She had chosen to live for herself, to walk a path of her own making, and though it was uncertain, it was hers to claim. The next day, the Royal Council convened in the Grand Hall, where Ariana was expected to give her final speech before the summit. The room was filled with powerful leaders from across the galaxy, each of them eager to hear what the future ruler of the Xylar would decide. But as Ariana stood at the front of the room, her heart was filled with a sense of calm that she had never felt before. For the first time in her life, she wasn't speaking to please anyone or to fulfill her duties. She was speaking for herself. "My friends," she began, her voice steady, "for many years I have lived under the expectations of others. My life has been planned, mapped out by my family, by the council, and by tradition. But I have come to realize that in order to lead my people, I must first lead myself. I must be true to who I am." A murmur rippled through the room, the leaders exchanging uncertain glances. Ariana's words were unexpected, and some of them were not pleased with the direction she was taking. But she didn't falter. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. "I have made the decision to choose my own path," she continued. "I will no longer be bound by the traditions that have held me captive. I will lead with my heart, with my own beliefs, and with the knowledge that true strength comes from within." As she spoke, John stood in the back of the room watching her with pride. He knew this was a pivotal moment in her life, a moment when everything could change, but he also knew that whatever happened, she was no longer the woman she had been when they first met. She was stronger, freer, and more confident in who she was. When Ariana finished her speech, the room was silent for a moment. Then, one by one, the leaders stood and began to applaud. It wasn't unanimous, and there were still murmurs of discontent, but Ariana could feel the weight of the moment. This was her decision, and she had taken the first step toward a future she could control. After the meeting, Ariana found John waiting for her outside the hall. She smiled as she approached him, her heart full. "I did it," she said quietly, her voice filled with a mix of relief and uncertainty. "I took the first step." John smiled back, his eyes filled with admiration. "I'm so proud of you, Ariana. You've taken control of your life, and now we face the future together." As they stood there, in the quiet aftermath of her decision, Ariana knew that there would still be challenges ahead, but she also knew that she had made the right choice. She had chosen herself, and with John by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next.